All right, we're back for another one. This is Jordan. Thanks for listening to this episode. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on your podcatcher and YouTube.
And this is Skylar. We're also on social media. Check us out on FB, X, and Instagram.
And if you want to be a supporting listener, check us out on patreon.com, where you get ad-free and early episodes before they drop on the regular feed. You can also support us using Bitcoin, God's money, or PayPal.
And don't forget to give us a rating or review wherever you listen to pods. Enjoy this one where we discuss the not well understood and magical worldview of Isaac Newton.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it.
We do not wrestle against flesh and blood, against flesh and blood, against flesh.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
But against principalities, against powers, against powers, against powers.
Ideological subversion is the slow process which we call either ideological subversion or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality.
And against the rulers of the darkness of this age, the darkness of this age, the darkness of this age.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Newton was not the first of the Age of Reason. He was the last of the magicians, the last of the Babylonians and Sumerians, the last great mind which looked out on the visible and intellectual world with the same eyes as those who began to build our intellectual inheritance rather less than 10,000 years ago. Isaac Newton, a posthumous child born with no father on Christmas Day, 1642, was the last wonder child to whom the Magi could do sincere and appropriate homage. John Maynard Keynes, in his essay, Newton the Man,
Keynes, the highly influential and famous 20th century economist, was fascinated with the life and philosophy of Sir Isaac Newton. He had written about him numerous times over his career, but made sure that when he gave lectures or wrote about the 17th century English polymath, he included very important details of his life, namely his eccentric occult beliefs. Newton appeared to be obsessed with the topics like alchemy. Though not an uncommon pursuit in his day, he did devote 1/10 of all his writings to the field, among other things. His interest in the subject began in his preteen years at the age of 12, when he was sent by his single mother to the town of Grantham, England, to study. His boarding house was the attic of an apothecary, where his inquisitive mind would discover the vast world of the esoteric. Newton was given free rein by the shopkeeper in the apothecary to explore the books and items within. One such tome was a title called The Mysteries of Nature and Art, which was a kind of alchemical work in its day. It contained instructions on how to make paint out of gold and how to make one an artist, not by practice and technique, but by enacting particular rituals and formulas. Another book that he would gain possession of was a strange relic of a time when the age of magic was transitioning into enlightenment. It was given the laboriously long title of Mathematical Magic or Wonders That May Be Performed by Mechanical Geometry. A mouthful, if there ever was one. Alchemy was the so-called science of transmuting one type of matter into another type of matter. In most cases, some base metal like copper or iron into gold. was almost believed that through the practice it was possible to create a potion of immortality. Newton seemed to have developed an obsession with it. Apart from his own extensive writings on the topic, he also possessed a trove of 169 alchemical books, which in that period of history could have perhaps been all of such books in print. He spent around 12 weeks per year at his private estate practicing chemical formulas that he had conjured from these texts in an attempt to unlock the secrets of the universe. His writings and interest into these subjects was kept largely a secret during and after his life. At the time, alchemy was outlawed by King James II over concerns that any sufficiently talented individual could produce infinite ounces of gold, which would in effect devalue the currency. Because of this, Newton kept his practices a secret and only told a select few number of friends close to him. Later in life, he had become famous for his works on universal gravity, diffraction of light, and centrifugal force, among other things, helping to kick off what would become the scientific revolution and an age of supposed rationalism. Once he had died, though, he had been elevated to mythical proportions. A man who had shed the heavy shackles of superstition to embrace the high call of logic and reason. Of course, this is nothing but a caricature of a man, and all those involved knew it. After his death in 1727, the managers of his estate purposely hid all of his writings and books on alchemy and other occult topics. For nearly 200 years, the public perception of the man was something of a scientific materialist, albeit a Protestant Christian loyal to the Church of England, who challenged the dogmas of the Catholic Church. This was all due to the fact that Newton's estate found his work on alchemy to be unfit to publish, therefore remained unknown to the public and academics alike until 1936, when a British earl by the name of Gerard Wallop acquired all of his collective works in an auction. Upon the purchase, he uncovered a vast trove of historical relics, which gave us far more insight into one of history's most important scientific minds. The revelations about Newton's massive alchemical undertakings came as a surprise to most. Make no mistake, whether or not there was ever anything of substance to this research, the scientist himself believed quite strongly that it was of great consequence and potentially even dangerous. In writings to his peers and scientific contemporary, the father of modern chemistry, who himself was an alchemist, Robert Boyle, he said this:
may possibly be an inlet to something more noble that is not communicated without immense damage to the world. There are other things besides the transmutation of metals which none but they understand.
Who were they in this statement? Well, he was specifically referring to the hermeticists, an occult philosophy that was developed as a sort of syncretism between Greek and Egyptian mythology, and based on the possibly mythical character Hermes Trismegistus. Hermeticism itself is a very strange ball of yarn that is difficult to untangle, as it incorporates a vast array of beliefs that seem to be borrowed from a large number of different cultures. It is simultaneously a belief and practice of magic, as well as a philosophical framework. But it was clearly an idea Newton himself was influenced by. It is hard to know if anything ever came of his alchemical research. He had held the work close to his chest, and not without good reason, as it could have resulted in his arrest, or at the very least, ruin his career. In going over his notebooks and transcripts, it is hard to even delineate between what is considered to be alchemical or scientific in nature. To Newton and his contemporaries, there was no clear line separating the two, and they truly believed they were indistinguishable. So the question becomes, did he make his scientific breakthrough because of alchemy or in spite of it?
So, alchemy.
Here we go.
This is just a massive can of worms. It's hard to really get a firm grasp on it, I feel. And I've sort of read about the topic on and off for a couple of years now. First of all, what are your thoughts on the whole thing?
I mean, how best to describe it other than a can of worms? It's so crazy, and it seems to be the proto science, like what used to be science.
Yes.
You just like combine biological materials. Sometimes you put in metals, and then you just see what happens. You know, you boil it, you put it through all types of stressors, and then you see what comes out at the end, and it's either medicine or it's poison, basically. At the end of it, right? But sometimes you create life from it too, and that goes into the homunculus and all that. That's a huge rabbit hole too. I don't know if you know that homunculus and golems.
Yeah, well, why don't you just quickly explain?
So homunculus is a life form created via the means of alchemy. They're disgusting means, typically involving blood, tissue, semen, lots of organic material to create a life form, and then you also need your intention too. So you're a bit of a witch or wizard when you're doing it as well. But it was like alchemy is kind of like the breakdown of spiritual superstition, I guess you would say, where you really break it down, try and break it down. I shouldn't say you really break it down because we don't know. I've never made a homunculus. I have no idea. But where I think we tried to understand, okay, why do these materials, when constructed this way, create a result in a medicine or a poison, right? So, and so the homunculus is kind of the ultimate work of the alchemist, is to create an actual life form out of this almost scientific method, but very what we would consider esoteric or occult. But probably they were probably way more materialist than what would have been considered a materialist
Today.
Today, yes, exactly. You can't just combine things and hope it.
Yeah, you sort of put your intentions or consciousness towards it.
Yeah,
and that will affect the outcome.
Yeah, exactly. So that is definitely part of it. But there's like so much, like you have to put the right materials in the right quantities. It has to be at the right heat. It has to be and a lot of this we would have pulled from like agriculture, like just from being a gardener myself. You know, certain seeds do better at certain temperatures when you're germinating, and in certain conditions. So that's kind of where they pulled their knowledge from. So they would be the first kind of rationalist, scientific type.
Yeah, because they're just
discipline.
It's just experimentation, right?
Yeah.
It is the process of experimentation.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a lot of what alchemy is. but alchemy also has this whole other angle to it where it's very occult and very esoteric.
Very.
And yeah, it's very much about manifesting outcomes almost from your like your own
Correct.
consciousness. And again, it's hard to actually find all the words to describe it. You almost have to describe it in story form in order for people to understand, which is like something like the famous book the Alchemist, if anyone's read that by Paulo Coelho, I think is how you say his name. I did read this book, and I kind of hated it.
Did you?
I thought it was kind of a silly book. It really came across to me as just very kind of in the self-help genre. It's a fiction. It's almost a fantasy fiction account of
Is this off that movie?
I don't know which movie you're referring to.
Wasn't there one called The Alchemist?
There might have been a movie. I don't know if there was a
wasn't
film.
Batman in it? Christian Bale?
Oh, I don't know.
I swear, no, it might have been called something else. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
go ahead.
anyways, but it's just about like how you sort of manifest your own greatness within yourself, and if you just believe hard enough, and then you can find like the secrets of the universe. And that it is weird because alchemy is on one hand all about the material world and what happens outside of you. So it's like turning base metals into gold and things like that. Right. But it's also about like your internal world and like a spiritual awakening that happens in you, right? So it is a Venn diagram of both of these things.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And so that's why it becomes like tricky to like wrap your mind around exactly what people are talking about when they're talking about alchemy.
I would also point out too that the alchemists, the great alchemists that we know of, a lot of them had no spouse or partner and no children.
Yeah.
So, and that goes between the male and female alchemists. They were typically so lost in their work that they couldn't function in a relationship to produce, or they were barren in some way. So this whole thing of creating a new life is, and then understanding the universe, like you kind of become your own god in a way because you're so lost, and probably you probably feel like crap because you can't produce life like you should, right? So, but a bunch of this interesting scientific / alchemical knowledge, so you're going to put that to use, and then you get more into your own ass about it.
Yeah.
and thinking you can become a master of the universe kind of thing. So anyways, I just thought I'd point that out.
It is actually, yes, strange. Like a lot of the famous alchemists. Now, to be fair, I mean, I don't have like a good sample size of all the alchemists who ever lived.
we don't know. I'm just saying that the bigger ones, the ones you might know of.
They get obsessed with it, like consumed by this topic. Yeah. And it is something where I get obsessed with certain topics too.
Yeah, same.
But I kind of get fatigued with them after a while, and then I kind of have to take a break, and I'm like, and then maybe I'll come back to it later. But there is something very strange like that draws people into the topic of alchemy, and you wonder like if they are not getting any results, why would they be so obsessed about it? But perhaps they are getting some kind of results.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just a little bit, but it's enough to make them wanting, right? It's enough to make them keep going. And
just little crumbs.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Little crumbs sprinkled in. Little things you learn. Yeah.
Yeah. But again, so going back to the whole...
Now, again, on the other side, we could just say that for any type of scientific discovery.
Yeah, for sure.
You try, fail. You learn more from the failure of anything than you do from a success, right?
It's true, but it's just the
amount of effort that these people would put in. Like, you guys should go look up a homunculus, what it takes to...
Yeah, what these people do to get manifest these things.
It's absolutely crazy to grow this being in basically a vat.
Yeah, if they in fact have ever been grown.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, we don't know.
know.
Yeah, we don't know.
It's sort of the claim, right? But yeah, alchemy is sort of a crazy big topic, hard to understand. It's not really like a cohesive worldview necessarily, or like a systematized doctrine. It is,
which is actually kind of to its credit. I would
perhaps.
think.
And again,
decentralized science or something, right?
Yeah, and it is this precursor to chemistry itself. It is a precursor to like metallurgy. A lot of the sciences originally, before today's sort of rationalist materialist framework, were baked. There was baked in assumptions about how you get these new technologies and develop these new techniques, and it was just as much of a spiritual exercise as it was like a scientific one. Newton's writings, especially those outside of Principia, really do shed a new light on his worldview. It perhaps even changes it, and it isn't even that he wouldn't have shared his esoteric side if he could. He was just hiding it so as to not get in trouble with the authorities. And we have to remember that the time that he lived, there really was this big battle between especially Protestants and Catholics. There was things like the 30 Years' War. If you go back and read, that's basically a war between Protestants and Catholics. There's a lot of tension, and so the Protestants at the time were more apt to be involved in things like occultism, whereas the Catholic Church was not, right? And yeah, because they could
no, their whole thing is occult.
On paper, there's like legalities about it,
right.
Whereas the Protestant,
they have their legal occultism versus their illegal occultism.
The Protestants didn't quite have that all nailed down. They do eventually, but again, when you're dealing with those kind of forces, it's very tough to not cross those kind of boundaries. Anyways, works like the Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, better known as colloquially just as the Principia by Isaac Newton. This contains sort of all his laws of motion, laws of gravity. This is like his magnum opus.
Gotcha.
He's remembered for.
So the alchemical working is the magnum opus. That's what you're going for.
What do you mean?
So like that's the ultimate, like the Philosopher's Stone, the magnum opus. Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, I say magnum opus just as a descriptor.
I know, but it kind of ties into what we were talking about alchemy earlier.
Okay. So works like Principia may only be considered scientific incidentally. But what would we have thought of him if his alchemical ideas were explicitly conveyed in his major works on things like gravity and light? Would we view him in the same way as one of the greatest scientists of all time, or just another superstitious crackpot not worth the time of day? That is you wonder if his ideas would have even got as much sway, because there's like an supernatural bias especially in academia, especially in the hard sciences. There's this very
100%
like anti-spiritual or esoteric, supernatural, whatever word you want to use to describe. There's this bias against that, and but we even have like the laws of gravity that we use. It's like the formulas and stuff that he came up with that we have built so much technology on.
Right.
Would we have done that if his alchemical research was on the fore?
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, like
he'd just be some crazy wizard.
Yeah,
and they'd be like, "Get out of here, wizard!"
Yeah, and they perhaps would have punished him, I mean, I'm sure eventually someone would have come across his work. Let's say in this alternate universe, someone would have come across his work and eventually been like, "Oh no, there's something to these like laws of motion, laws of
Did we just
gravity."
come up with a new audio drama podcast right now? I think we did.
Alt histories.
I think we did. Alt history Newton, where his alchemical stuff is known.
Yeah.
Oh man. It sounds steampunk already.
Yeah, exactly. History could have like completely changed.
Yeah.
Or it could have just simply been we were more accepting of these sort of ideas, these esoteric ideas of something more unseen about the scientific world.
It seems, just going back to our last episode, that a lot of these monarchs were very open to these ideas.
Yeah,
like,
most some weren't, some were anti. But,
but some were anti. But I bet you secretly they were still consulting soothsayers, fortune tellers, seers, somebody to give them some kind of wisdom and knowledge outside of what they already knew.
Absolutely. And like scrying was super popular, and scrying, I believe, was mostly a technique employed by a lot of the aristocracy back in the day.
Yeah,
Right?
That's crazy.
Because it was expensive to get a good scryer, quote unquote. A lot of them were
a good scryer. What is a good scryer? Tell me what a good scryer is. I'll be a good scryer.
Yeah, and I mean, scrying is. It's one of those things.
Weird.
It's like a Ouija board, right? Like,
correct.
That's kind of what.
Except it only uses your brain.
Yeah,
which is actually more terrifying than a Ouija board where you get multiple people in. Yeah.
Another point I wanted to make was Newton's Christian theology.
I don't know much about his theology. What was it?
So he was a Protestant,
right? Other than that, though, what did he believe? Do you know?
Yes, a lot of Protestant, well, even Catholics to this day will they like to brag about Newton as being like one of their own, right? Like if it wasn't for these Christians investigating God's universe, we wouldn't have all this great scientific knowledge, which maybe I wouldn't totally dismiss that point. However, Isaac Newton's theology was certainly not orthodox, and if he was very open with his theology, he probably would have been considered like some sort of like he would have been on the same level as like the Marcians back in the 3rd century or whatever.
Oh, okay. And what is that?
So, it turns out he actually rejected the Trinity. So that was like a big.
So he's like a oneness kind of. Theology.
Something like
Unitary? Is it?
Maybe. I don't know if that idea even existed back then, but
I'm wrong about that.
He was more like a deist. So like he believed God exists, but doesn't necessarily interact with you personally at all.
Interesting. Almost agnostic. Almost.
Yeah, but he believed in a very, I don't know how to say, spiritually alive world, esoteric world.
Well, he's an alchemist, so yes, he would. Yes,
100%,
of course.
He's an alchemist.
Of course he would.
He's
probably interacting with spirits.
But his fascination with the sciences, I think, was a genuine attempt to investigate and understand God. Like that does seem to be part of his theology. But he had a lot of ideas that would not be considered orthodox in the slightest. And I think that Christians, if they want to brag about him as one of their own, they should just be like a little bit careful. This guy isn't exactly the I don't know, peak Christian peak
trad.
Yeah, exactly.
Peak trad.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, we were engaged in practices we would almost like today call witchcraft or something like that, you know, and also had beliefs that are not orthodox, that were very heterodox. So I also wanted to make, before we moved on here, I wanted to make one note about Galileo, who strangely died the same year that Newton was born.
Oh, interesting.
He also had obviously a big conflict with the Catholic Church, And so there's like a lot of modern perceptions about Galileo and Newton, sort of defying the Catholic Church and what their dictates were.
Right.
I want to make one little note, and in defense, I'm not a Catholic, but in defense of the Catholic Church on Galileo, a lot of people there's this whole thing about Galileo that is often brought up as like, Galileo defied the church's superstition and brought down this just a superstitious nonsense that when he discovered a heliocentric universe, right?
Right.
That's not exactly how it went.
No,
down.
it is not. Not even close.
So Galileo, much of the Catholic Church was actually totally willing to accept Galileo's thesis, but they had this whole bureaucratic system in which you had to submit a new thesis to be like accepted as scientifically valid.
Oh, like a peer review?
Yeah, like a peer review process
from a university?
from a high church of priests.
Yes. Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
In order to be accepted. And Galileo himself, his whole life, he was very maverick, and he didn't really like the church. And so he was always doing this thing and kind of poking at the Catholic, intentionally provoking the Catholic Church, being like,
Fair.
I'm going to present all of these like scientific ideas, and I'm not going to submit it to you to be accepted or not. I'm just going to
do it.
Yeah, I'm just gonna do it and present, which I appreciate. Hey, like,
of course.
you don't need, the truth doesn't need permission, right?
Yeah,
At the end of the day, the truth does not need permission. And so there's this misconception that like the Catholic Church just like refused to accept it, which is not true. They would have had he like, and they eventually did.
Did.
But they would have at the time of Galileo had, and not like put him in jail and all this stuff, had he like submitted to the proper process, right? It was just like, it's way more boring and bureaucratic than I think.
It's brutal.
So I wanted to.
Victimless crimes all over again.
Yeah, exactly. It's just the state doing things.
I dared to think and then tell people that I thought a thing.
Yeah.
And now I'm in jail.
Yeah,
awesome.
Without like filling out the proper
Yeah.
forms.
Yes, I didn't fill out my thought paperwork.
Exactly. Again, it's still ridiculous. It's still kind of absurd, but it isn't like the cardinals and the Pope and stuff were just like steeped in this superstition and completely unwilling to accept new ideas.
Right. It's more that he just didn't follow the paperwork up.
Exactly.
And he dared to present something without the proper paperwork.
Yeah, exactly. So that is kind of the thing that happened with Galileo, at least from my understanding. Again, I'm no scholar on these topics. This is just kind of my sort of surface reading of it.
Right.
And I think a lot of that was with Newton too, and but because the during this time, the Catholic Church had sort of like gone back and forth with being like the dominant power in England before like the Church of England finally established itself as the church, like the Anglican Church of the English Empire. And so there was sort of like one monarch would be a Catholic and then they would die, and then the next monarch would be a Protestant and they would die.
And they went back and forth forever.
The Protestants and the Catholics were trying to gain control of the whole empire, right? Of the whole British Empire. And so like Newton was trying to sort of play within that sandbox and do a balancing act of trying not to totally upset both sides, at least from my reading of it. But the reason he kind of committed himself publicly as a Protestant was because the Protestants at the time were just like way more willing to accept his ideas, right?
Right. What a pressure cooker that must be for someone like Newton. You are literally balancing all of your work in between the state, the church, and society.
Yeah.
And you're trying to you have some great ideas, and you're getting crushed by all sides.
Yeah,
and
you're constantly having to play politics and wheel and deal and get enough
just to do
allies to
just to think
Yeah.
even probably right, like all these writings we just talked about in the first part, like what he had to keep those hit. We didn't find those till 1937.
I
Are
know.
you kidding
It's
me?
crazy.
Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah,
like
200 years after his death.
200
Yeah.
years that he like kept, like that must have been quite the burden. And I would not be surprised at all if there were powers and principalities whispering in his ear this whole time. How could you not? Like you have this great mind, this great intellect, but you have all of these blockades to your thought, to your life. Like you could probably, I don't know for sure, but I bet you they'd put you to death back then for something like this, or at least
you could,
or at the very least bankrupt you so you would be dead soon enough, right? So, or just imprisoned until you were dead. And so I don't doubt for a second that there were things whispering to him.
Yeah, and as we go throughout this podcast, we're going to discuss these things where there's this interplay between things unseen and things seen, and the powers and principalities. They occupy both of those landscapes, the unseen and the seen.
Absolutely.
But walking this tightrope, there's difficulty between like being a scientist and a magician at the same time. The last of the magicians, as Keynes might say.
It's actually a great quote.
It is such a
quote.
good quote.
Man.
We
were talking about it earlier. I was like, man, that's such a good quote.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Even though Keynes is the awful.
Yeah, Keynes is a whole nother rabbit trail. But this was like a difficulty during this whole period. And now we're going to step back just a little bit before Newton's time, and we're going to explore another character who was like Newton in a lot of ways. One John Dee. Thanks for listening to this episode, and stay tuned for the next one. Check out all of our links in the description, and if you become a supporting member, you can get this episode extended and ad-free.